Hey there everyone, and welcome to this edition of TJ's Reef. You may notice that the tank is not where I said it was going to be. So we're going to cover that. Thanks, babe. So we'll cover the tank movement and plumbing on this episode. Stay tuned. Language! I feel like Steve Rogers with the language thing. I certainly don't look like him. Hey there everyone, and welcome to TJ's Reef. This episode we're going to primarily focus on plumbing the new 120 tank. But first I want to cover the fact that we are, well, back where we started, I guess you could say. If you've looked at the previous episodes, you know that we went from one side of the room to, actually, let me back up. If you went and looked at the previous episodes, you'll know that we went from an in-wall in the library to now just a tank on a stand in this room in our house. And we went from this side of the room to the other side of the room. And now we are back to this side of the room. And really, honestly, the only reason it's back on this side is aesthetics. And the way furniture and the way this room is laid out. So really, there's really no other issues with it being on the other wall other than it just really limited how we could arrange furniture and everything with the TV that's still in this room. So we are back to this small wall. Now, you may notice something that I'm wearing today, a little Reef Breeders action, and we will be covering Reef Breeders items in a upcoming episode, probably the next episode. We'll be talking a lot about the equipment that's going in the tank, which does include some Reef Breeders equipment. So we will reveal all of that soon. But today we are focusing on plumbing and what we've been doing with the tank. Oh, there is one other thing. I wanted to go over the waterproofing of the tank. I think I mentioned it in the tank build episode, which you can see right here. Which was the previous episode on putting together the tank and the design we did. And one of the things I mentioned is sealing all the wood. If you're going to go with a wood stand, you need to seal your wood with waterproofing material. And I just used Thompson's Water Seal, the stuff you would seal a wooden deck outside with. And what I did is coated every piece of wood with the sealant. It's really simple. It's even easier than painting. It's like painting with water. It's super fast. You do not need a lot. If you put too much water seal on, you are going to end up with a sticky mess. So a thin coating of water seal will protect all the wood. Make sure you seal underneath as well because of the humidity. So, you know, you seal the top and anything because you might get spills and whatnot, but make sure you seal areas that really won't have water spill, but they're exposed to moisture. And you know, when you have a sump and you have this all sealed up, it's going to generate humidity, and you want to make sure the wood is protected from that as well. So what I did is a quick little demo of what happens when you seal the wood. So let's take a look. Okay, just a quick demo of why you want to put waterproofing sealant on your stand. Now, the obvious is spills, but let's not forget just evaporation, humidity, all that stuff. Make sure you treat all surfaces of the stand. Make sure you get the edges real good. Make sure you get the top and bottom, everything, because humidity will sneak into your stand and cause it to expand and contract. So here I have a piece of plain plywood. It's actually a cutoff from the bottom piece for the sump, which is down there. Not treated. This is the top, which was just cut, and I need to now seal up the sides and the underside. The top's already been sealed, so untreated, treated, and I just have some water, and let's see what the difference is. So here we'll put a little water on the untreated, and you see how it just sits on there and it will start to soak in if I rub my hand around it. And then if we sprinkle it on the treated, Well, we've got a big, there you go. See, now you can see the beating effect that is occurring on the treated versus the untreated. You see how it's actually soaking into the wood here? And if I move this out of the way, it just moves. Doesn't leave a water spot behind. It doesn't soak in at all. Where here it's actually, this is actually soaked into the wood. Like the wood is actually damp. You can actually see it's soaking in through the sides. This water is just beating right off on the top of it. And that tells me we've got a good seal. In fact, let's see. If I lift this up, let's see if it runs off. Zoop. There goes all the water. So that is a good coating of sealant. All the water is beating up, not soaking into the wood. So this is treated. So that is why it's really important you take this extra step and treat all your wood of your stand. So now you can see why sealing your tank is so important. So don't skip that step if you are using wood to build your tank stand. Now you can tell we are underneath the tank. We're down in the refugium/sump area, and you can see that we already have all the plumbing in place. However, it is just dry fit. Now let me explain what we did to get to this point. I went to Home Depot, or excuse me, I went to Lowe's and purchased all the plumbing. And the plumbing for this tank cost around $100, which is actually really cheap. Now you can tell I just went with plain, white, standard PVC, the stuff you can pick up at a Lowe's or a Home Depot. I am a firm believer in my watch going off whenever I'm talking. I'm someone who believes that money should go into the tank versus underneath the tank where you're never going to see it. Yes, I'm definitely going to spend where it needs to be spent, such as, good lighting, a good skimmer, all that kind of stuff, good equipment. But something like having amazing black, red, orange, blue piping underneath my tank that you never really see unless I'm doing a water change or something, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. In all the tanks I've plumbed, I've always just used good old everyday white PVC Schedule 40. It's available just about anywhere, and it's relatively cheap, especially when you compare it to the cost of the colored PVCs that a lot of fish stores sell. That stuff's just so expensive, and I don't know, it's not important to me. If it's important to you, go for it. If you want to save yourself some money, but you still want that look, I've seen people buy the white stuff and spray paint it. So you can do that too if you want. It's just not my thing. Like I said, I'd rather spend $4 on a 10-foot section of PVC than $24 on a 10-foot section of PVC. But whatever you do, make sure you do it right. So what are some things I've learned? Number one, get yourself the right tool for the job. Cutting PVC can be a pain in the butt. And if you're using a handsaw or something like that, you are going to have cuts that are not square. This is a piece I cut off, and you can tell, hopefully, that this is a perfectly straight cut. If you don't have straight cuts, they're not going to seat properly when you glue them together, and you're looking at the potential for having leaks, and we don't want leaks. So I just picked up this tool that is made for cutting PVC. It's super easy. It ratchets down with a blade into the PVC, making a nice clean cut every single time, and you don't have to worry about having angled cuts or cuts that are all jacked up. If you don't want to buy one of these and you have a miter saw, you can use that as well. I've seen people use that, and that will guarantee a nice straight cut as well. Now, one of the other things you want to do when you are plumbing your system is dry fit everything. Don't start gluing things into place as you go along. Do your measurements, make your cuts, assemble everything dry fit. And when you dry fit stuff, make sure you push the pipe into any fittings as far as you can when it's dry. That's what we have right here, is everything is dry fit. None of this is glued yet. And you may notice that I have black lines drawn at every single one of the connections. If you've never glued PVC before, here's something you need to know. When you dry fit it, you're only going to get the pipes into fittings so far. When you glue them, the solvent allows you to push it in further than when you probably dry fit it. And if you do that, you are going to now shorten your pipe length. And if you do that enough, pretty soon nothing's going to line up because you've shrunk all these pipes through the fittings. So let's say it's 1/8 of an inch. And now you've connected 8 pieces through fittings. You've now reduced the overall length by 1 inch. Actually, that would be 4 fittings because there's 2 on each side. So if you're 1/8 of an inch off on one side, and then you put another pipe and you're 1/8 of an inch off the other side, now you're at 1/4, keep it going, keep it going. Next thing you know, you're 1 inch off and you've got problems. So what I do is I make a line where everything connects, and when I glue everything back together, I glue them to that line. I don't push it any further, and then I know that everything will line up after gluing. Now, another thing I've done is I've tried to take out 90-degree bends wherever possible and or necessary. Here on the return pump, the 90-degree bends aren't a big deal because the pump is going to push the water past these 90s and into the split here. So that's not so much of an issue. On the return line though, I have it coming straight off the box into a 45, down and then into another 45. This takes the 90s to help the water flow faster out of it. So try to keep 90-degree bends out of return lines. Excuse me, the overflow lines. On a return line, if you're going to tee it or split the returns, you need to make sure that once you get to the tee or where it's going to split, that the run to each of the lines is even. So I have the water coming out of the pump through here through this valve to the tee, and then the distance from this tee to the right and left are exactly the same. And I did do 45s to keep it, you know, a little less resistive as they go up to the returns. Now both return lines come up over the back of the tank. The tank was not drilled for the return lines, and I didn't want to take a chance of drilling on a used tank, so I just decided to go up and over the back. And the PVC is just put together, loops over the top, and sticks into the tank. Now, you do have some bright white PVC there, which in a couple of months will be covered with Coreline and will blend into the tank, so no big deal. I will be answering my phone apparently. Never fails. I am considering 3D printing some random flow generators to attach to the return here and on the other side over, well, the light kind of screws that up, so never mind. We're just gonna go back here. To the returns on both sides to kind of spread the flow out. And remember in a previous episode, I said that the flow coming from my return lines are not really part of my main flow for this tank. So I'm not too concerned. I just don't want this jet of water going straight out of there into the tank. So using a random flow generator can help spread out the flow. Now, it's never a tank build unless you come across some problems. And so far, I've only come across one issue which had a pretty easy fix. And it had to do with the overflow box. Again, this was a used tank, came with a really nice overflow, but the plumbing was cut off and I had to replace all the bulkheads and everything. Not an issue. I mean, I would have done it anyway. And the person who had this tank before me apparently didn't plumb their tank properly because they obviously had a leak. They had used some blue sealant to try to fix this leak, and I want to make sure that we don't have any leaks. So here's what I noticed when I tried to plumb the overflow box. So take a look. Okay, so one of the issues with the overflow box is the previous owner, you know, the fittings were just shot and everything, the bulkhead, so I had to do new bulkheads. So not an issue in and of itself. In fact, he's got blue sealant all over the bottom on this side. There were no issues with the overflow. It was with his pipe connection. He had blue sealant all over. So it's just stuck on the bottom here. So this one's already in, but let me show you what the problem is with this. You get the 1-inch bulkheads, but they don't fit because there's not enough space between the hole and the edge of the acrylic. So what I had to do was take the bulkhead and see if you can see this, right where my finger is, if you could tell, it's flat there. So what I did is I had to just file down, there you go, file this down so that it would fit against the acrylic, the side of the overflow. It was like less than 1/4 of an inch, more like 1/8 of an inch that I filed down just with a hand file. I did not file the gasket because the gasket's a little bit smaller. So now when I put this in, let's see here. The nice part is it makes tightening these up a lot easier because they can't turn. So now it fits perfectly up against the glass, and now I can screw my bulkhead in without any issues, and it seats nice and tight. And I did do a leak test. I had to file them both down, this one and this one, and I mean, you can tell, barely filed down, just enough to get in there and lay flat. And I did a leak test and no leaks, so we are good to go here, and just about ready for that, the all-important leak test. So as you can see, it was a pretty simple fix. Just had to file down an edge on the bulkheads in the overflow box, and problem was solved. We have a watertight seal, so we should be good to go there. So what's next for the 120? Well, now that we've got everything roughed in and dry fit, we need to clean the pipes and glue them together. Now, if you've never glued PVC before, it's a pretty simple process. And the gluing is actually kind of a misnomer. When you are putting two pieces of PVC together, you're not really gluing, you're actually welding them together. The glue for the PVC is actually a solvent that melts the two pieces together, and that is a permanent bond. You're never getting that apart. So if you screw up, you have to cut it out or unscrew where you have unions, and that's kind of why we put those in there. So you have to replace minimal parts when there is an issue. So it's a two-step process when you glue PVC together. The first step is cleaning it, and I use this stuff. It's the purple cleaner, and all you do is there's a sponge attached to the lid here. You take it out, you put the solution around the end of the pipe and the solution on the inside of whatever fitting you're using, and it dries almost instantly. And then the next part is using the cement. I use the clear PVC cement, same applicator in the cap. You put some cement on the pipe, you put some cement on the inside of the fitting, you push them together. Now I'm going to be pushing them together to those black lines that I've drawn. Push them together, give it a little bit of a twist, and that's it. It's done. Almost instantly it hardens, and it is a watertight permanent seal. So now that you know how we're going to do it, let's start gluing the tank together. We're done. We glued everything together. PVC is all done, and that means there's one thing left to do. So that means we need to Cue the time-lapse photography of filling of the tank now. Well, we made it through another episode here, and we have successfully plumbed the 120. That is going to wrap it up for this edition of TJ's Reef. I think we covered a lot today. Got the whole tank plumbed. It's up and running. It's almost silent. It's not quite silent yet because the one pipe is not completely in the water. So that will be fixed as we continue to fine tune things. But the cool part is this pump is completely silent. It's running full peak and I can't hear anything. So I'm loving that. I think the next episode we're gonna start digging into all the different equipment that we have for the 120 and what's gonna be running it. You can see there's no lights yet, and we don't have the skimmer in here yet, and you know, all the other stuff we need, the pumps in here, the wave makers and everything else, which we have it all, you just haven't seen it yet. So equipment for next time, but until then, this is TJ saying boom. Boom, boom, boom. There's some hose in the house. There's a hose in the house. There's a hose in the house. There's a inappropriate. Literally an entire house, and the dog decides to chew his bone right where I'm sitting. Brick, have you no shame? I'll take that as a no.